Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Almost Dropouts podcast. I'm your host, Davik, and today I have Shreyas on the podcast. Shreyas, you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely, Davik. Thanks for having me, and it has been exciting to come back after almost year and a half to 2 years to this podcast. I remember we had a previous podcast conversation purely focused on product management, internship, and Amazon. And now, as you have come along the way, I came along the way as well. Right now, I work as a director of product and data at Spocket, responsible for
Mhm,
entire product organization, including product management, design, and data work. Before Spocket, I worked at Amazon for their recruiting engine organization. Started my PM journey with a company called Bloomreach, which is in Bay Area right now, almost a $2.2 billion company. Was founding member of Elastic Path to start their B2B e-commerce journey. They were pretty much focused on B2C earlier, and we started the foundational work in 2018.
mhm,
My PM background include, interestingly, both B2B and B2C. However, lately I started enjoying a lot B2C. From
mhm,
an industry perspective, I worked on e-commerce, recruiting engine, and marketplace products.
mhm. Yeah, and I think it's funny you mentioned, I think one of my first podcasts, yeah, it was with you a long time ago. And like you alluded to, that was more focused on internships and product management. But it's been really interesting to see how both our careers have developed throughout that time from that podcast. So it's an interesting reflection there. But starting off, let's talk about your story first. So as you mentioned, you have a lot of product management experience right now, but let's take it back from the beginning. What I assume first you had an interest in software, and then what led you into product management from there?
Very interesting question. And I know you'll hear a lot of stories about product managers talking about getting into the PM world accidentally.
Mhm.
However, for me, it was much more planned journey. So not as per the norm of the industry. I'll take you back to 2012, 2013. I finished my master's in computer science from University of Houston in 2011 and started
Mhm.
my career as a software engineer with this company called Mezio Software. And if you guys are familiar with the Dropbox and Dropbox B2B uh, product provision, its Mezio Software was file sync and share solution for enterprises. And it was a small company, 25 people. So I had a lot more ownership as a developer. And I came up with an idea to expedite sharing and syncing files for enterprise companies, because that time a lot of our customers were using Microsoft Outlook, and how you
Mhm.
can actually share a file, because if you think about it, you have to download the file, attach a file to the email and send, and that was a much more painful effort. So I came up with an idea at that time: how can we actually just allow them to get a link from our software and then connect that and add that link easily in the email. And
Right.
it would have solved two problems. Number one, they don't have to go through this lengthy process, and reduce that literally with the one or two clicks. And then second, every time you actually attach a file, it's consuming a space in your Outlook, and
Mhm.
sometimes you have to do cleanup, and then later on you probably going to lose the data. So it's going to solve that two problems, and that's what I actually focused on. And interestingly, I didn't even know about the PM role until that time, but I was
Right.
responsible for literally everything, like talking to customer, talking to sales team, collecting the pain point, doing the user interviews, thinking about the UX. I came up with the UX as well at that time, and doing the development, installation, and end-to-end procedure, and even like a branding as well. And that was
Right.
the first instance where I actually got a chance to know about the product role, and that basically started my journey preparing for the product role at that time. Now, I came from a pretty non-business background, pretty technical background, and I wanted to go the traditional route where I wanted to understand and know about the business, get an like a entire view, the holistic view, or 360-degree view of the business. And that's why I
Mhm.
actually decided to pursue my MBA. I did my MBA and then eventually got into the product. So that's a quick background, but it was much more planned effort than
Right.
accidental role.
Right. Right. That's really interesting. So, you started off as and I think that's one of the things a lot of people I think don't see. Sometimes in a software engineering role, you do a lot of product management stuff without even realizing you're doing product management. So in that case, like, when you led that initiative, it's interesting how you came as a software engineer, but you were doing product management there, and then that sort of developed into that love or that desire to do product management.
Absolutely, and I definitely want to share that lessons for anyone who wants to come from a software engineering background. Identify opportunities where you can actually do, let's say, user interviews, identifying the customer pain point, do the customer journey mapping. Think again, like if you are in a B2B world, thinking about like helping, let's say, your marketing team or the sales team, because that will set a lot of foundational work for you if you are looking for a product role in the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you made this product. You went to go do your MBA. So what led you to Bloomreach?
Um, so I wanted to actually like I didn't know about the Bloomreach at that time. I honestly,
Mm-hmm.
after my MBA, targeting all the Bay Area based companies, to be honest with you,
Right.
and that's where I identified a few growing and upcoming startups at that time. And Bloomreach was around 6 years old company, much more stable, and I wanted to understand the entire e-commerce business. So I was that time targeting specifically like e-commerce roles, and that's how I
Mm-hmm.
basically landed on a Bloomreach job.
Mm-hmm. So then you started like your PM career then, or your full PM career at Bloomreach, and then you went into co-founding Elastic Path Software. So how did that develop into that? How did you go from Bloomreach to Elastic Path?
So just a small correction, didn't
Yeah.
go found Elastic Path. Elastic Path was a
Okay.
much more established product, but they were
Okay.
only focusing on B2C e-commerce platform. So just to
Right.
give you a background, Elastic Path is a e-commerce platform
Mm-hmm.
helping companies to create their digital version and start their e-commerce business. So it provides, let's say, managing product catalog, managing search, a lot more like merchandising capabilities and all that. However, their customer base was significantly on B2B side. Now, at that time, Elastic Path was headless commerce. I'm not sure if you heard this term in the e-commerce market, but what that essentially means, everything the backend will be driven by API based work where there is no fixed front end attached and you
Mm-hmm.
can connect any front end, whether you take it mobile app, whether you literally take it any vending machine. And they realize because of their business model it makes sense to start thinking about expanding into the B2B side. I did initial research and set the foundation of entire B2B account management capabilities at Elastic Path at that time. The reason I moved from Bloomreach to Elastic Path was purely based on my immigration status. I did
Okay.
not have any issues in the immigration in the US, but I wanted to eliminate entire H1B process at that time. So I actually applied for my Canadian PR, got the PR, and then started looking for a job. But at
Yeah.
that time, I realized I was in a state or I was in my career journey where I wanted to make sure I have some functional expertise. And because of Bloomreach, I had a solid e-commerce background. So I started identifying all the Canadian companies, specifically in Toronto and Vancouver at that time, who are in the e-commerce area, who I can actually use my expertise. And at that time, Elastic Path was looking for somebody who come from a search background because they wanted to improve their searching capabilities on the B2C side with their e-commerce platform. And because of my Bloomreach background, I was a perfect fit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that makes sense. That you went into Bloomreach, and then you eventually went into Amazon. So what sort of let you what made you decide to go from the smaller companies to a bigger company, Amazon?
Um, Amazon decision was purely based on understanding the product processes, and I realized if I want to become a product leader, I need to know all the frameworks. I need to understand how I can coin the new products. And though I had that one background or experience, it was much more organic without clear direction. And as you
Mm-hmm.
know, Amazon is like one of the giants and experts like launching a new products, they have a pretty well defined process. Not sure if you heard about the working backward, or even their press release approach, PRFAQ, what they talk about internally. You have to write a press release for your product as if you're launching that product today, and usually that's 2 to 3 year vision. And as a product leader, it is really important to understand how you can think about all the nuances of that product without
Hmm.
even launching that product. So you will be mentally forcefully to think about how you can actually identify all the challenges, all the issues, all the requirements much ahead of the time, rather than wait till you actually launch it. So that was
Right.
the process I wanted to understand, and I have gone through that process at Amazon, gone through the yearly planning at Amazon, and Amazon's approach on that basically helped me to gain some of the solid expertise as a product leader. One thing which I learned over the period of time, and a lot of PMs actually think about, if you are a great individual contributor as a product manager or a senior PM, you will eventually become a like a manager. But both role need completely different skill set. There is a huge gap.
Hmm.
I call that as a, there is a huge valley if you are taking that jump. So you need to shift your mindset to understand what's your objective now. You're not responsible for one single area, and I think about this as a, you're not responsible for that I, you are more responsible for uh, T level approach, which is more of a broad approach rather than a narrowed approach. And you have to think about what skill set you want to build, and those skill set I believed Amazon provided me.
Right. Right.
And
So.
I'm pretty sure now your next question will be why I want to get into this pocket side.
Hmm.
So just to even talk about that part, uh, I was actually helping Spocket doing some product advising while I was
Hmm.
at Amazon, and that time, because of pandemic, Spocket started growing a lot. Spocket founder Saba needed somebody to take over the product, and for me, it was a perfect leadership opportunity. I was the first product person at Spocket, helped Spocket build the product organization, hired PMs, designers, and a data person. So for me, it was not planned, but it was actually came much sooner to get this opportunity to be part of the startup and build entire product
Right.
organization.
And as someone now with all these different experiences, different organizations, what are some big like differences you see between them? Of course, there's scale, but even in the way they approach product, like is there a huge difference you see, or is there a lot of similarities between all these different companies?
There is a difference, depends on where the company is, or what stage of the company is. So, for example, let's say at Spocket, our focus is always move fast, right? How quickly we actually build something without losing a focus on the future. Versus
Hmm.
in comes Amazon or any bigger organization, you have a lot of stakeholders. So you have to make sure you get a buy-in from the stakeholders. So as a product manager, your focus will be a lot more on the stakeholder management than actually coming up with the ideas. Yes, you have to come up with the ideas, but if I have to divide my day, I would say at Amazon, you'll end up spending 70% time doing stakeholder management, status report writing, informing people, getting buy-in from them, and then 30% of the time you really focus on doing all the product related work. Versus at Pocket, it's other way around, right? You focus a
Right.
lot more on like identifying opportunities, doing the thinking time, thinking about what we want to build. Because every time you make a wrong decision, you don't have that much bandwidth or leeway in terms of whether it is finances or whether it is in terms of time. The other people or other competitors could easily take over and take your business. So
Right.
prioritization doesn't matter which company you are in, it's foundational, but the stakeholder management is vastly different.
Hmm. That makes sense. And then, I think you've had a pretty long and established career now, a very successful career. So for you, is there certain pivotal points throughout your career that you reflect on and you look back at?
um, Absolutely, definitely. There are two key moments I recollect. So the first one is joining Bloomreach was definitely one of the pivotal point, or I would say defining moments in my career. And the reason I wanted to say that is because of Bloomreach leadership team and the way Bloomreach founders actually build a culture at Bloomreach. I actually learned a lot, and the biggest gain I actually had was how to understand the business, getting that 360-degree view, because sometimes even after you finish your business degree, you don't know where the business is going or how business is happening. And that actually provided me a lot more confidence as a product person to understand the business, but at the same time the company's cultural value, how the company was built, was much more defining or pivotal for me. And the second was to build my product leadership career with Spocket. Um, it was surprising. I did not even think about how long I actually came after joining the Spocket. I originally started more into IC level role and quickly established myself, started building the company. And the team as well. I, if I remember, in last almost 2 years, I have interviewed at least more than 500 people, and that is not just
Right.
across the product role, across every single area, helping the founder, more like bar raising kind of approach. Talk to finance people, talk to operations people, talk to product people, engineering people. So understanding that interview process and understanding how to evaluate a candidate to make a decision was a huge deal. So I would
Mhm.
actually categorize these two things more of a pivotal or a defining moments in my career.
Mhm. Makes sense. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Spocket, just for context for our listeners. So, if you could just go through like sort of what Spocket is and some of the features that are part of it, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So, just to give you context, Spocket is a leading platform that connects almost more than 60,000 online entrepreneurs with thousands of weighted suppliers. Now, if
Hmm.
you are familiar with the entire dropshipping ecosystem, people start their online business or e-commerce business using platforms like Shopify or BigCommerce, WooCommerce, and then they are looking for inventory because they don't have their own warehouses. And this is entire $1 trillion inventory distortion issue, where you want to find out a product from the local supplier, because eventually you want to deliver that product to your consumer or your end customer within 2 3 days. And that's where the
Hmm.
Spocket comes into picture. So Spocket is a typical marketplace connecting dropshipper retailers with the local suppliers from US and EU.
Hmm. So the main value proposition for Spocket is that you give customers the ability to connect with suppliers. So if they want to start a dropshipping business, they can go to the website and have relied and trusted suppliers that they can buy products from.
Absolutely, and that's exactly it is, because if you think about it, if you are building a business, there is a lot you
Hmm.
actually do, and in this e-commerce world, the supply chain and logistic and then inventory management is a big ask. And if you are an individual, you cannot actually manage everything. And then on top of that, identifying multiple suppliers who can provide you value in terms of cost and the quality of the product is critical. So that's where we actually reduce that pain point for drop shippers, where they don't have to think about the product quality, product cost, and everything. We basically have like thousands and thousands of suppliers from the local ecosystem, where we onboard their product, and then dropshipper can come in, identify their niche, find a product, and then push these product to their online store.
Right, right. That makes sense. And then in terms of, I know you're the head of product of Spocket, so of course, let's talk about your approach to product. So, I know one of the biggest conversations of the in product management is being data centric or being intuition based, or there's a more in depth product philosophy that every product manager has. So I was just wondering, for you, what is your approach to product management?
Um, Interestingly, I don't think about product management is either data centric or intuition based, I always
Hmm.
think about it's managing or finding that right balance between data centric approach or intuition based approach. But over the period of years, I built my product philosophy around three key pillars. The first one is product innovation, and what that means is looking at the customer feedback, and this goes back to your data centric approach, right? Like finding
Hmm.
the customer feedback and understanding what customer is talking about. Then the second, within that product innovation bucket, looking at the customer behavior, what exactly they are doing, and that's where sometimes the data comes into picture. Because if you have the right instrumentation and you understand the customer behavior, you can figure it out what are the problems they are facing, whether they are actually clicking on certain features or not, whether they have the visibility. And the third within that product innovation bucket is understanding the human psychology, because a lot of time customer do not know what pain they are facing until you actually
Hmm.
make them talk about it. Just to give you an example, like a lot of time we ask people, hey, what are the challenges you face when you travel, or what are the pain points you face when you travel? And customer will provide a long list of things. Oh, I have to prepare for everything I need to carry. I want to make sure my flights are on time. I want to make sure my connecting flights are on time. But there are challenges you genuinely face, because a lot of time customer cannot control what happens when they are traveling. And those things you have to put yourself in their bucket and think about what how do I approach when I travel. So basically that human behavior or human psychology is a critical part of that product innovation bucket. The second
Hmm.
pillar which I want to highlight is thinking about the long term. A lot of time you actually end up making certain strategic decision to achieve your short term goals, but that short term goal may not provide you a long term benefit, and that's where this whole product thinking approach comes into picture. If I build this, what's the impact of that? How do I measure the value? And then think about what you actually going to build next is the question you constantly have to ask yourself. And this basically start, like if you follow the continuous discovery and continuous identification of the problem, you automatically start getting into the product thinking or thinking about the long term approach. And the
Right.
third one which I built over the period of time is the operational excellence, and this is exactly what I was talking about earlier in terms of Amazon, right? You do a lot of stakeholder management, your status update reporting, looking at the matrix every day, but we underestimate this work, right? We don't think about product managers, like we never talk about those things, because we
Hmm.
think, okay, this is something part of your job. But you end up using, let's say, 30 to 40% of the time. Even a company like with a company like Spocket, it has to be given a certain weightage, and you need to be good at it, right? How quickly you can achieve that, how quickly you can look at the matrix, how you actually share the status update, so that there is no back and forth with your leadership and all that. They clearly understand your messaging and all that. So that's where three key pillars I actually focus on, just to repeat, like product innovation, thinking about the long term, and operational excellence. So that is my product approach. And
Hmm.
going back to your question, so it's less about either data centric or intuition. It's always like how you manage the balance between those two.
Right. And yeah, that definitely sounds like three solid pillars, I think, sort of to encompass all the different aspects to think about as a product manager. So definitely, thanks for sharing that. I think that's really interesting. Um, and sort of, the next part about this, I of course, you mentioned that becoming a manager is a little bit different than being an individual contributor. And so for you, now that you're, as a head of product, what qualities do you look for in someone or in somebody when you're hiring them, and when you're building a team, and what has been some like interesting challenges and lessons you've learned from moving to management, like into an upper management role?
Interesting question. Let me first think about, or at least answer the question of what are the qualities I look for.
Hmm.
Honestly, it depends who I am hiring for or what role they will be focusing on. Because I don't believe you can actually put everything in one bucket. You have to think about what role you are hiring, what basically they are doing, what's your objective, and based on that, you have to think about the skill set. I'll give you an example. So far, I have hired a product manager who focused on the experimentation side, so more towards the growth area, a product manager on more feature development, understanding the problems, and more like a functional PM kind of role. Hired couple of designers in the past, so that is a completely different bucket. And then also hired a data person, even worked with the data scientist, onboarded them and all that. So
Mhm.
every time I focus on this, it changes my perspective. What is their goal, what these person are going to help the company to grow, or what they are going to achieve for the company. So based on that, I have to think about what their qualities will look like. But just to give you in general perspective, I come from a very functional background, right? I call
Right.
myself as a functional product manager rather than growth product manager, and there are different buckets. You see somebody a little bit more technical, somebody more functional, somebody more on the growth side. And when it comes to the functional side, I actually think about whether this individual has a product thinking approach or not. Can they
Mhm.
actually go in front of customer, talk to customer, and ask right questions so that they can identify the problem? Because at the bottom line, product person job is to find all the problems product has, and then decide the prioritization. But the prioritization part, I can help them, or we can get leadership support. They don't have to do everything, right? But their
Right.
job is to find out all those critical problems so that we can actually create a quantified version of the impact of that problem, and decide which one to prioritize. But talking to customer and asking them intelligent question is the most critical aspect I focus on when I hire for the functional PM roles.
Mhm.
I believe you
And
asked me another question.
mhm. I can start with that one after, but I sort of had a follow up to that. So when it does come to talking with customers and trying to get those product requirements and trying to understand how to build, what do you think are some general like what do you think are some general virtues that somebody who's good at doing that will have when they're interviewing customers?
uh, can you elaborate a little bit more? I want to make sure I understand the question.
Yeah, for sure. So I was just wondering, like what when you're looking for somebody who will be able to go in, have these product interviews with customers, be able to know the requirements, and be able to know how to guide the product. Is there certain virtues that you see in somebody when you're interviewing them that sort of tips off to you that they will be good at doing that? So, for example, like maybe them being empathetic or something along those lines.
The biggest thing which I actually realized over the period of time is, are you asking the right question, or are you just listening and taking that and then not moving further? I'll give you an
Hmm.
example. If a customer is saying they are not able to discover this capability, or let's say they didn't even know, I will ask a question, what exactly they were trying to achieve. I will try to understand how did they even come to this specific page, or why did they not realize they are there is a capability, or there is a button available. And this is pretty general example, but asking
Hmm.
the follow-up question, and if somebody is doing that and putting out there in front of the customers and making sure you are understanding uh, what customer is sharing, but also asking intelligent question, is something I actually focus on a lot. And if they are not just stuck with the response and say, okay, that's perfect, are they asking the follow-up questions or not, is becomes a critical factor for me.
Right. Right. That makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then yeah, the first initial question I had, the this follow up, the second question that I asked you earlier on was along the lines of, so you mentioned sort of the me approach versus the us approach that you have to start thinking about. So I was just wondering, in your journey from going from an individual contributor to more upper management, have there what have been some interesting challenges that you faced? and adjusting your style and your approach to work?
That's a great question. And when I was working as an individual contributor, one of the biggest aspect is I used to always wonder why my manager is asking this question, why he wants to know all the details, what am I doing, and I realized that is critical because he wants to have a visibility, making sure I am making the right decision and I'm moving forward, and if there are any blocks, he can actually help come and help me. And
Hmm.
that piece I realized after becoming a manager, making sure my direct report will create that visibility for me. However, if they have not seen the other side, they will never know why the other person is asking. Similar to the case what I have actually gone through. So that is the environment and framework I have to create for them so that they can continuously follow that approach, and I will automatically know where things are, and making sure I help them to quickly move forward is critical for me. And I realize when you want to get an understanding of everything happening in the organization rather than just one specific thing, you need to have a certain routines and structure available. And that's the reason I actually set the foundation for, let's say, creating the product wikis, making sure we have a weekly updates, we have a weekly touch points. They basically shared a
Hmm.
format or the status report in exactly same format across all the PMs, right? So that way when I am actually synthesizing that information, I don't have to think about it. I can connect the dots, ask the question, and I do the same thing for my manager as well, right? Because he's responsible for not just the product, but let's say finance, product, operations, engineering, everything, right? So the amount of information you're going to consume is a lot more. So how can you make sure you provide the right info without actually get into the too much details is critical. And I need to
Hmm.
provide that direction to my direct report so that they can actually provide me ongoing visibility, what am I looking for, so that I can make a better decision. And I have to always be comfortable with knowing limited stuff and making a decision based on that, and that is just an inevitable part of the leadership as you grow further. But if you have created the right routines and right rituals, right frameworks, you'll automatically get to know what you actually care about. And that was the
Right.
biggest lesson for me moving into the management role.
Hmm. No, that
And
makes a lot of
just to give
sense.
you the example of routine, so for
Mhm.
example, we did not have a way to report KPIs. We were doing it on a weekly basis, but at startup things fluctuate a lot more. What we actually did is on our Slack, we have certain funnel KPIs, let's say sign up to trial matrix or like a trial to paid conversion. We created a structured response, and the person who is responsible for those metrics started reporting on a daily basis. And we just defined this fixed timing, fixed format, and we just started getting a lot more visibility, numbers, how they are fluctuating. There was a one time when we pushed something a day before, and that caused a specific sign up to trial matrix went down, but would not have that visibility if we wouldn't have that clear framework for the reporting. So because of
Right.
that, we immediately find out the number went down, ask PM to dig into it, find out it caused because of the launch we did last night, and we immediately revert that and then further did the debugging and all that. But that
Right.
created much more confidence for me as a leader. I know what's happening and I have enough visibility to make a decision to move things in the right direction.
Right. That makes sense. And I think, especially like, so I'm on more the individual contributor side now. So sometimes it can be a little bit, it can be a little bit tough for me to understand some of the frameworks leaders instill. But I'm sure now that, you're in that position, it makes a lot more sense, sort of like what you alluded to there. And I think, it's just a different perspective, right? That you're looking at things. So it's,
Yeah.
it's really interesting to hear how your approach to these frameworks or your thoughts behind these frameworks is just different now because you have to make sure that you have visibility on all the different items going on, and you're able to oversee the product development.
Yep. Makes sense.
But yeah, okay. So now talking more about the space in general, I was just wondering like what in the drop shipping space is super interesting to you, and then overall in the e-commerce space, what really excites you?
I think if I connect the dot with the much larger space, when it comes to the drop shipping, it's about this whole supply chain logistic and inventory distortion problem, which is also available in the e-commerce space. And that's where this whole e-commerce market and opportunity to try new things is much larger. Just to give you some numbers or specifics, and this is a public information, there is a e-marketer website, and like there's a Gartner website. According to them, uh, this e-commerce market is almost 6 trillion market by 2023 or 2024. So if you imagine, right now we are, I believe, at close to 1 trillion. So the opportunity we have to tap into the new areas, build new capabilities, and solve customer problem is much larger. Just to give you another number, as per Nasdaq, and Nasdaq predicted by, let's say, close to 2040, almost 95% of the purchases will facilitate by e-commerce just within the United Kingdom or within the Europe itself. So that's a
Yeah.
much larger space if you think about it. So opportunity is there, and as a product person, you want to continuously solve for those problems. You look for those opportunities, you identify the market, and that's basically excites me a lot, because
Hmm.
you are not just restricted by, okay, how should I even target on a specific user base. And I'll definitely want to highlight, like, building a product is easy. Understanding the distribution of the product, go to market strategy is the most difficult part. And when you have
Right.
so many players or so many consumers in the market, it becomes much more easier for you to think about how to solve and identify their problem. And that's the biggest piece excite me about the space.
Hmm. No, that makes sense. Yeah, I think it's really like e-commerce is just getting bigger and bigger, and especially as around the world, people are getting like easy accessibility to smartphones and internet connected devices. It's only going to get bigger and bigger. So that's $6 trillion. Wow, that's a huge figure, but it definitely makes sense. The grand scope of things. So
Yeah,
that's
sometimes
it's a very interesting
it's
space.
just a funny thing, joke. Me and my wife talk about it, and we're like, once we will, like, in the down the line, we'll have our kids. Kids may not even actually use the laptop or mobile phone. They'll just start using more and more voice commands to actually even place an order
Right.
for whether it is food or whether it is even clothes. Right, literally sitting on your couch, looking at the virtual reality version of your website, looking at the clothes, and place an order directly sitting there. That world or that vision, I don't see that as far away from us. So those
Yeah.
opportunities will definitely, as a product manager, excites me a lot.
For sure, yeah, no, and I think even if you just look at the pandemic the last 2 years, I can talk about myself personally. I never used to be. I always used to be more of a person who liked to go into the market and stuff, but the last 2 years have completely changed that for me now. And this the convenience of being able to order stuff online and have it shipped to my door is too much. So I think it's only gonna get more and more, and like you mentioned, like the new technologies coming out with VR and voice, it's only going to make that process even simpler. So it'll be really exciting to see. Um, but yeah, I guess just some finishing questions. So, given your expertise, what do you think some of the biggest aspects of growing a business in 2022 are?
Interesting. I think, as I actually mentioned, going back to my previous response, it's less about building the product, but finding the distribution. And when it comes to growing the business, finding the customers, right? If you know the entire customer funnel, acquiring the customer, let's say through the sign up, if I just talk about B2C business, and then if there is a subscription, like letting them go to the trial, becoming the paying customers, and figuring out what are your biggest sources of those customers, whether they are coming from the direct channel, whether they are coming from the sales channel, whether they are coming from the partnership, is the biggest thing founders or the product leaders continuously has to have to think about it. Now the funny part, if I want to take this approach to a bigger level, I'm pretty sure you must be reading a lot about like web3 and the blockchain, and how this all providing enough opportunities to the creator economy. And the way
Mhm.
I think about it for the future, how you can combine these two aspects. So when I say these two, is basically combining the creator economy with commerce. And these things are happening. Like if you take an example, a lot of influencers actually selling the product, that becomes a
Right.
source for all these brands to actually create more visibility for their brand among consumers, right? But these influencers may be getting a much smaller share of the pie, like some sort of percentages. But how you can utilize the web3 or the blockchain aspect to combine these two things, like a creator economy and commerce, provide more opportunities to influencers or content creators, but at the same time create more visibility. There is an
Yeah.
interesting article from A16Z which talks about how you can create a go to market strategy from Web3. I can send you the link, which you can tag it in the podcast.
Hmm.
But that
For
is
sure.
something which I see the future, or that's an opportunity for businesses to grow their business, how they can actually use
Right.
this information to think about uh, improving their acquisition, customer acquisition, because in the end, it's all about acquiring a customer and then eventually retaining them.
For sure. Yeah. And I think if you look at some of the biggest businesses that have come up in the last 5, 10 years, a good example of that is Gymshark. Their whole business, like a lot of, like their whole marketing plan focused on influencers at a time where it wasn't completely, it wasn't the, sort of the go-to strategy for marketing. And they became huge because of that. So I think that's definitely a huge aspect of it. And it makes a lot of sense. Being able to tap into the creator economy for the future completely changes the viability of your product.
Yep.
But yeah, perfect. Well, that's all the questions I have for you. The last one I lied. Sorry. One last question that I have is, what are your next steps? What's next for you?
Um, Professionally, where we are at Sprocket right now, we are definitely looking to scale the product. And my personal aspiration is also to scale the product and think about how we can actually make things a little bit bigger. When it comes to in general for as a product manager, I do want to make sure I continuously learn new things and focus on thinking about the newer framework, because I do believe, as I already pointed out, I am a very framework oriented person, and it provides much more freedom and visibility, transparency for me as a product leader. So I want to continue to expand on that, but want to focus on the scaling up a product at the next level.
Makes sense. Well, thank you so much, Shreyas, for coming onto the podcast. It was really great having you. I'm sure we'll have you back on the podcast again. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Davik. It was great
All right,
talking to you.
everyone. All right, everyone. Well, I hope you had a great time listening. I hope everyone's staying safe. And till the next one, take care.